Welcome to Work From Your Happy Place, the podcast that equips you with the knowledge and inspiration to live your dreams and find your own happy place. You will be encouraged by and learn from entrepreneurs and artists who are already working from their happy place, all while pursuing their passion with a purpose. Be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter for a recap of the week's guests and a preview of what's in store. We also have 2 special gifts for you: a video, the 5 core principles to living a happier life, and a printable download titled Top 10 Sales Strategies. Go to workfromyourhappyplace.com/free. Fill out the attached form to receive your gifts and be added to our newsletter. And now, here's your host, Belinda Ellsworth.
Hi, it's Belinda here. And before we get started with today's show, I'd like to tell you about some exciting things coming soon that I think you're going to love. After over 500 episodes, we've discovered so many tips, tools, and bits of knowledge that we want to share it all with you. So this spring, we are launching a brand new online community and quarterly subscription box. Here's how it works. Each quarter, you'll receive an amazing box full of items to bring you happiness in both work and in life. Each box includes items designed by entrepreneurs just like yourself for your home, office, personal care, and so much more. It will also contain a business book and our Acts of Kindness shareables so you can show appreciation to your customers and anyone who needs to be lifted up. In the months between box deliveries, you'll learn from an amazing community of business owners, including guided trainings on business skills and personal development, a book club that features Q&A time directly with that month's author, and a monthly featured guest from whom you'll learn strategies to grow your own business. You'll learn from one another through our private group, as well as our live monthly Q&A session where you can get all of your questions answered. Sound exciting? How would you like a free 6-month subscription? To enter, get on our VIP list by going to workfromyourhappyplace.com/VIP. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show. Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Belinda Clemmensen, and she is an author and founder, a change maker. She believes women are not only capable of changing the world, they will be a driving force in making it happen. Belinda is a leadership development professional and what led her to build the Women's Leadership Intensive. With over 25 years of experience, Belinda has helped leaders step into their potential and connect to a place of purpose. She is also a proud co-founder of the Leader Coach Intensive, a unique program that builds world-class coaches, tomorrow's leaders today. It is my pleasure to welcome Belinda to our show today.
Thank you so much, Belinda. It's great to be here.
Wow, it's so much fun. We were just talking. We don't run into too many Belindas, so having someone on my show is it's interesting and unique and kind of just strange, I gotta say.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think I have anyone else in my circle who's named Belinda as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So 2 powerhouses. Here we go.
Let's
just dive in and give us a little bit of your background in kind of what led you to what you're doing today and a little bit on that journey.
Yeah. So I've been doing leadership development my entire career. I kind of fell into it, to be honest, and then fell in love with it. I was doing a science program. I have a biology degree, which I've never worked a day in biology. But along that journey, I found sort of outdoor education, which took me into leadership education, which led me down this road of leadership development practice. And I've always loved it. But I have to say, about 8 or 9 years ago, I started to really question what I was doing because I was working for a lot of organizations and corporations, helping them with their leadership development. But I kept asking myself, do I believe in what they're leading? Do I believe in the way they're really leading in this corporation or in the more sort of capitalist system that we're living and working in? And I couldn't sort of unsee the inequities that I was seeing in organizations anymore. I couldn't unsee the gender roles. I couldn't unsee the fact that almost the entire C-suite was middle-aged white men. And so I started to have trouble reconciling that with the work that I was doing. And so it sort of led me to what I call a crisis of consciousness, where I wondered, am I really doing with my life what I want to be doing? Even though I'd valued my work, I felt like I'd done great work over the course of my career with great people. It stopped being a good fit at a certain point. ethically and sort of in terms of social justice. And so that sort of got me down a few years of really not knowing. I knew if it wasn't that, then what would it be? Right? If not
Mm-hmm.
doing that work, then what work would be fulfilling? What would feel more aligned with my personal mission? And it took me several years to kind of land on the fact that if I wanted to support leaders, the leaders I wanted to support were women. And that sort of came from my own personal experiences in my life of doing projects with groups of women leaders, but also from digging into research and starting to understand better the actual gender inequities that exist and the well-researched benefits of having more women in leadership roles. So even though the business case is pretty watertight for having gender equity in leadership, we're still nowhere near there.
No, we're not. And nobody really wants to address it. Really address it. Or talk about it, I guess, is a better way. Like, no one wants to have a casual conversation about it or recognize, or how do you get through it? How do you work through it? So I'd love to hear a little bit of your data and research on what makes women better leaders. I'd love to hear some of that to start.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think, the digging into these conversations makes people uncomfortable. And I don't know if that's just all change processes make people uncomfortable or if it's this one in particular. But certainly, the research on the inequities is easy to find, right? So, for example, Fortune 500, we just hit 10% women CEOs of Fortune 500 companies in 2023, right? So 10%. That's where we're sitting. And you might say, okay, being a CEO of a Fortune 500 company isn't something I aspire to be. However, we can't deny that those people have incredible impact and influence in our world, right? They influence policy, they influence economics, they influence resource consumption and waste disposal and employee experience and huge customer bases. So women are primarily excluded from that. We know that, women are sitting somewhere just under 30% in politics, for example. Globally, women are doing 2/3 as much unpaid labor, domestic and caregiving work as men. So all of that data is pretty easy to find.
Mm-hmm.
And it was partly the fact that I knew it because I'd looked for it, but a lot of other people didn't know it that led me to write the book in the first place.
And what's the name of your book?
The book's called Women, Leadership, and Saving the World.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, the subtitle is Why Everything Gets Better When Women Lead. And that's really the answer to your next question, or your first question there, which is what is it that women do differently that makes them better leaders? That women naturally take a multi-stakeholder view because nature or nurture, I'm not sure which it is, but most women I know are in a life situation where some form of multitasking is their norm. Most women have a life experience where they do have multiple stakeholders that they're responsible to and that they're considering all the time. And so what that means is that women have a bit more of a 360-degree viewpoint around stakeholders. So, if we think about business in the past, it's sort of been shareholder as the only important stakeholder was kind of the way we set things up. In today's world, the leadership responsibilities now are much more complicated than that, right? We have responsibilities to the community. We have responsibilities to the environment and sustainability. We can't ignore all of those multiple stakeholders in the way that we may have been able to do in the past. So women bring that skill set to the table. Women also, whether learned or inherent, have a lot of strong interpersonal and emotional intelligence skill sets that are critical to leadership, right? Things like empathy and understanding others, being able to communicate, being able to sit with people's feelings and their mental health challenges in a way that wasn't an expectation of leadership in the past, but it is today.
Wow, so true. I find that it's where does the real I certainly have had issues myself throughout these years of, and again, some people are like, "Oh, that's not how it really is," or like people don't think it's really like that in whatever real world they consider. But I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it is." Even in contract work or wherever it may be, even with speakers. I remember being on the same stage I actually spoke for quite a bit longer because I had a presentation in the morning and then I had a presentation after lunch. And then this individual was kind of somewhere in between, very well known. And the CEO, who was also kind of friends with me, sort of let it slip what they paid him.
Yeah.
And it was 3 times what they had negotiated and paid me. And it happens all of the time. And women do it to women too. And women don't, when you talk about it to another woman, they kind of feel like, well, that's just the way it is. And it isn't, or it doesn't have to be.
And it shouldn't be.
And it shouldn't be. And yet it continues to be. And it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. The thing I have found the most frustrating, and some people are like, oh, they act like you're just whining about it. Do you know what I mean? That's why when I say people don't want to address it, they really don't. But I've always looked really, really young for my age, like going all the way back into my 20s. I looked like I was 13. And so this continued. And when I first was a professional speaker in my mid 30s, I had people saying, oh, well, when you're a little older, it was almost like I'd be valued more when I got a little older and wiser and my time was coming. Well, you know what? When my time came, now they're saying, we want someone a little younger.
Absolutely.
They don't value women that they've aged. They look at a man as they're wiser. They don't look at a woman as being wiser. They look at their unrelatable. And I don't know what can be done about it? Like, seriously,
Yeah.
I know that this is your field and this is what you're forging forward with. But like, what can really be done about the whole thing? Or when is the shift going to happen? We're in 2023 and it's still 10% of women are Fortune 500,
Yeah.
leader.
Exactly. And I mean, I absolutely feel your frustration and I echo the frustration. I know exactly what it feels like to also have to bring these issues to the surface and have them be dismissed, which is a great technique for not having to deal with them. I think there's a deep shift that has to happen in how we value things that have been considered feminized. So, the work that women have always done has always been undervalued. Caregiving work, household work, all of those things, and to the point where they weren't even counted in economic models, and they certainly weren't paid in terms of those kinds of work. So it was all the work of men that was valued in our economic systems and in our society. And so, of course, when we get underneath some of these things, we have to start shifting our fundamental valuing of people to say that the things that women do, the things that women bring to the table are equally as valuable. And I mean, if the pandemic taught us nothing, it taught us the value of care work, right? And so this idea that we can somehow run a society just on, for-profit corporations and not worry about social systems or caregiving work, whether that's healthcare, childcare, elder care, et cetera, is an illusion. It's just not true. And so I think it's a fundamental shifting of our social values to start to value different kinds of contributions and different people's contributions in different ways. That's, I think, the underneath piece. And I think women need to value ourselves as well, which is part of what you're talking about, which is, we have women who are also discriminating against other women because they are also have been raised in a system that does that. So they think it's normal to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That has to shift because that's a huge betrayal, right? So women not supporting women is a bigger betrayal than men not supporting women.
And yet I see it just as often, sometimes more. No, you know what it is? I think men do it behind the scenes and women will do it right to your face. I mean, like they'll say it, it's crazy. But yes, women have got to stand up and they've got to start saying, like, we've got to be in this together. And why would I choose this man's opinion over this woman's versus who's qualified? Like the man could be very much more qualified, but in many cases he is not.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're absolutely right about this idea of we need to come together as women and support other women because, there's a couple of reasons why that's been discouraged by the systems we live in. One is there's been this sense of competition. So if there's only 10% of women CEOs allowed at the table, then we're going to fight for that 10% spots, right? What we
Yep.
need to be thinking about is how do we widen the pie for all women? Not
Yes.
just how do we fight for the little spots that are there. The other end of it is that we have been taught that if we align ourselves with men, we will have more power and we will be safer in the systems that exist because men are the ones who've historically had the power. And so a lot of women align themselves with men because then you have proximity to power. You're close to it.
Yep.
But it's an illusion because you still don't truly have it. Right? You have to toe the line and do what they tell you in order to keep it. Otherwise, you're out. So it's an illusion of safety. It's an illusion of power. And I think it's time that we start waking up to that reality and start aligning ourselves to truly support other women and other equity deserving groups, right? I think it will be women coming together who create more equal and equitable systems and societies. No one else is going to do
Absolutely.
it.
No, I agree. So what are some things then that women can do? Give us 3 tips on some things that women can do to sort of find their way into leadership or to rise up to being the leader that they inherently could be.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the first thing is Gloria Steinem has this great quote, which is essentially, I might get it wrong, but it's essentially this idea that women will not be equal outside of the home until men are equal in it. And so it's this idea that equality begins at home for women, because if we don't have more equitable distribution of household labor, then it is impossible for us to make the strides that we might want to in our professional lives, right? Because we just don't have the time, we don't have the energy, we don't have the mental bandwidth. And women who do that, who balance both of those things, run themselves really hard. So it's
Yes.
not impossible, but man, is it hard work. It's much harder work than it is for your male colleagues to do the same. And so,
Absolutely. Don't
yeah,
you think that has shifted? That is the one shift I would probably say that I've honestly seen more of. And maybe it's just because it's in my own household and a few of my other friends' households, but am I crazy in thinking that has shifted more?
no, we're getting there. We're getting there, especially in European and North American societies. We are getting better on that. Globally, we still have a long way to go.
Sure.
But we're not there yet in terms of actual equality on a couple levels. There's new data that I was just looking at today that's showing that we're getting closer in terms of equality on household chores, but we're not there yet on caregiving work, whether that's childcare or elder care or anyone else who might require it in our communities. So women are still doing more of that caregiving work, even though the housework is starting to even out a little bit better.
Yes, agreed.
And then the other piece that's unaccounted for is the mental load that women carry. So this is like remembering that you don't have toilet paper. This is remembering that you need to buy broccoli for dinner tomorrow. This is trying to figure out what to even make for dinner every single day. This is remembering that your grandmother's birthday is coming up and you need to send a card or buy a cake or it's all of that kind of stuff, or that it's your colleague's birthday at work. And hey, we should do something for that person. Or somebody was upset a couple days ago at work and you should check in with that person, right? It's remembering and tracking all of these things that create a huge mental load for women. That means that we're taking up a lot of bandwidth with that stuff that men just aren't taking up the same amount in their own minds. They have more freedom mentally to be able to think or just to be able to rest, frankly.
Yes. Okay, so I got you off your three tips. So we had said more equality in the home. What are some other things that they can do?
Right. Equality in the home is one. Surround yourself with people who truly support you. That's number two. So as you said, you've had these experiences where you've raised something and you've been dismissed, or you've even had women, colleagues or friends or whoever they might be who don't support you when you're talking about your actual lived experience, which is true for you, right? That's really what happened. So it's finding a group of people that will understand, affirm, and validate what you're talking about when you're talking to them, so that you don't then also have to wonder, am I crazy? Right. So I had
Right.
this experience, I talked about it, and everyone told me it wasn't true, or it wasn't like that, or that wasn't really the way the world is. Now I'm questioning myself again. Right. So we want to move away from that and move towards where you go and are able to talk to people about your experiences and they say, oh my God, yeah, I get that. I hear you.
I think it's also, I mean, this is crazy, but I'm just going to bring it up. Like, and women do this to women as well, because I don't think men do this as much to women. But like a man can show up and work. He can look whatever he wants to look like, show up whatever he wants to wear. And yet we are, our hair isn't done right. Like women are so critical of, she's getting old, or her hair isn't this way. Did you see what she was wearing? It's like, my goodness, when are we going to stop being so, how can we ever get ahead if we're going to do nothing but be critical of one another and tear each other down? And why is it that the more beautiful that someone is, the more likes they're going to get on Instagram versus the smarter that they are or the tips that they're sharing? I'm blown away. And we've even sort of did some of our own kind of research on that as far as social media gals. I had this gal that's super sharp, but also very, very pretty. And so when she would just dress like more conservatively and go on there and give some really great information, hardly anybody would like it. But if she wore something extremely provocative and shared an idea or tip, she got 5 times the amount of likes and comments. And I just don't even, I don't, and this isn't just men doing this. This is predominantly women doing this as well.
Yeah, and this is it. I mean, the objectification of women has been internalized in our society across the board, right? So men objectify women objectify women objectify ourselves, right?
Yes.
All of the external judgments that we put on ourselves, we're doing it to ourselves too.
Yes.
And so again, this is like, I think it's like a deep dismantling that needs to happen where we are valuing ourselves and each other for our humanity, for our contribution, right? As opposed to seeing ourselves as these objects that need to be perfected, which, by the way, is a huge economic machine because women then spend a lot of time and money doing all the things required to stay inside the lines, right? To stay looking a certain way, to keep your body a certain weight, to try to make sure that you're appropriate when you show up in this setting or that setting, to anti-age, to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I often think like if we took all the money we spent on weight loss in North America and put it towards and eradicating poverty, we'd be in a way better spot, right? Like we've got to reshuffle the priorities here and start to put our humanity first.
Wow, it's a great conversation. So let's continue with for yourself. So in this journey, everybody's got sort of their superpowers or their skill sets. What have you sort of identified as yours that have really helped you in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think I work hard to make complex things digestible. And I think that's probably just my own mental process first and foremost. I make it digestible for myself. And then I think I'm able to communicate concepts well. which in my line of work about, doing leadership training and writing is really helpful. I also think there's something to, just straight up perseverance and being able to stick with something long enough because the ideas and being a visionary, to me, those things are critical if you want to, be an entrepreneur or do meaningful work or whatever it is. But those are, I really think those are a small percentage of the total, So it's like great to have the concept, the idea, the vision, but the majority of the work is showing up and putting one foot in front of the other and learning and sticking with it. And I think I'm a fairly committed person. Once I decide I'm doing something, I'm able to stick it out.
Great. So tell me about something that you're really proud of. What's a project, accomplishment, something that you've been part of that you're super proud of?
Years ago, let me see, I was 30 years old. So like 23 years ago, I started my first women-centered organization. It was a volunteer-based organization. And it was a fundraising project where we raised money for breast cancer research. And it was expedition based. So we took breast cancer survivors and their supporters on kayaking trips in the wilderness, which was just a passion of mine at the time. Anyway, through that project, we did a couple of amazing things. We raised almost $1 million, which feels
Wow.
great. We took hundreds of people into the wilderness to have like truly healing, community-based experiences, life-changing stuff. And we also operated as a truly feminist, women-based organization. And that was a cool experiment because we did things so differently than what we had seen before. We learned a lot. It wasn't all perfect. But it really showed me that, there's lots of ways to build an organization, and we tend to always default to this sort of same model over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to. We could try new things.
Absolutely. And I just have to say, I love it that you answered that very succinctly and so quickly, because this is a hard question for a lot of people. Tell me something you're proud of. I've even reworked it in different ways. And recently I was listening to a whole podcast on being able to brag or be proud of something. And yet there's this connotation of being proud isn't a good thing. And it's we need to stand up for ourselves and say, this is what I did, and it was really awesome, and this was the result of it, and it really shaped my life, or it impacted a lot of people, and I'm super proud of that work. And it is important. It's why one of the reasons I asked the question, but I will tell you in the 6 years of doing this, that people struggle with that question. And I'm so thankful that you just answered that without even a hesitation. Some people roll their eyes or say, oh, almost apologetically giving their answer. And I don't even know that people realize they do it.
What's so interesting to me about this too is that for me, that experience of doing something that felt very fulfilling and that I'm proud of has been a huge motivator for me to do more of that. Which means it's a huge motivator for me to then have more positive impact if I can, right? Or at least try to. And so I think if we withhold ourselves from being able to feel proud about things, I wonder if we're also withholding ourselves from moving into those spaces where we can have more positive impact, where we can be more fulfilled, but also make a bigger contribution.
Gosh, that's an interesting dissection or topic in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
We could go on so many rabbit holes.
Yeah.
I know, right? But I think you're right, because it is a struggle, and a lot of people, women, and of course, I think anybody that has children would say that, but everybody resorts to, well, I guess I'd have to say, or I would be remiss if I didn't say my kids. It's no, tell me about a project. That's why I did change that. Tell me a project or a campaign or something that you were a part of, because that is 90%. Before I started switching that up a little bit, that was the number one answer that women felt they had to give, or
Interesting.
it didn't, like they were somehow not being true to themselves or being honest or being a good mom.
Yeah.
It's the most interesting thing to me.
Yeah. Or fear that they would be judged if they didn't say that, right? If they
Sure, that's what
didn't
it
put
is.
their kids first. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Ugh. So then let's talk about the polar opposite of that. What's a challenge that you have faced in sort of forging this path for women in leadership? What's one of the biggest challenges that you faced? And then how are you working through that? Or did you work through it?
I think it's work in progress for me. I am a fairly quiet, introverted person at my core. It's not the work I do. The work I do is in the world and using my voice. So I think there's always a bit of a push pull for me of there's a temptation for me to just stay quiet about things, keep it kind of small. And I've had to really work at using my voice, finding those deeper motivations to use my voice to try to make some kind of a difference and to put myself out there. And yeah, I go back and forth between loving that and being terrified about it.
I
It's
do know. I love it. I love what you're doing. So
thank you.
I appreciate it very much. This conversation today has inspired me because I'm at a crossroad of my life where I'm doing something new. And it's always been super safe in another space where I've been, although it's not been easy. It's been safe, but it hasn't been easy. Everybody needs to understand that there's a difference. But now it doesn't feel safe and it's still not easy. So then I wake up every day going, I'm critical of me. Like when you said women have to stop being critical of themselves, I'm like, I don't want to go on Instagram because I don't want to be judged and look and everything. And I've just got to get over it. Like I'm having an internal struggle myself with what I know I need to do to move this new project forward, to get people's eyes on it, to make people aware of it, to really come into my own. They're not just going to find you by themselves, right? And yet it's in those struggles of ageism and just those things that it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's an internal struggle every day. And today I'm like, okay, this is it. Like your conversation today has inspired me that I need to get over my own self. Like the only one really holding me back is, well, there's other people holding you back, but the biggest person holding me back is me.
Yeah. And I think, there's two things that I rely on here. One is, what's your why? Right. So I ask myself that question too, is like, if there's a bigger motivation for me that helps me get over my own stuff, because I'm like, okay, I'm trying to do something that matters. So that's one piece of it. And I think, the other piece of it is in the how. So it's like, maybe you do have to go on Instagram. Maybe that's the what you have to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then the interesting question, I think, the next interesting question is, okay, how do I want to do that? Can I do it in a way that feels like me, that feels aligned with my own values and my own, bigger purpose? And I think there's more wiggle room there than we give ourselves credit for sometimes in terms of the how. There's such a box that the world says, okay, this is how you have to do Instagram. This is how you have to do writing a book. This is how you have to do running a business. And I say, not necessarily.
Yeah, I love that. Get people really thinking and having that conversation. So what does working from your happy place mean to you?
I think, if I'm being honest about that, it's when I have a bit of freedom in my life to truly be creative, have a bit of fun. I have a tendency to be a nose to the grindstone person. I think I came by it honestly. It's in my family. Like I learned it at my dad's knee. I just work. And that's great because it's productive, but it's not the road to happiness for me. The road to happiness, I think, just has a little bit more space, a little bit more freedom, more breathing room, a little bit more creativity.
Absolutely. And what advice would you give to others kind of wanting to forge their own way, whether it's female, male? It's like, it's scary to leave that job. Like you came to a crossroads of, yes, I've got this job. Yes, it pays really well. I'm going to guess that part. I'm just assuming. And it was your career and you're like, I don't even know what else I would do. And yet it didn't align ethically or morally with what you really were feeling. And I think that happens to a lot of people. And so what advice do you have for them as they're wanting to forge this new path? And it's pretty scary.
Yeah. I mean, the best advice I ever got was somebody said to me early on in my first business, 3 to 5 years, give it 3 to 5 years. And of course, at that time I was like, well, because I want it to be, it'll probably be more like 2 to 3 because that's what I want it to be. And the reality was it did take 3 to 5 years to really get clear on what is this business? What do I have to offer? What do my clients look like? What does my marketing look like? What's my network here? And so I guess giving yourself some runway, right? And not expecting that you're going to figure everything out on day one or year one. Give yourself some runway and know that it's an iterative process. So what you think it is today might be different a year down the road or 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road because you're going to be learning and you're going to be experiencing all good things to do. But some of them, as you well know, some of those lessons are hard lessons. Some of them are easy lessons. It depends on the day.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. Well, that's great advice. So any new and exciting things that you're working on that you'd like to tell our listeners about, and then please share with them how they can find you.
Yeah. So we're just doing final quality control on the audiobook version of the book. So that's coming out soon, which is fun. And we've been doing a lot of keynotes and talks at various corporations and associations on these topics of gender equity and women in leadership. And so it's exciting that people are finally, we're scratching the surface, but finally people are opening the door to having more of these conversations. So that feels pretty exciting too. People can find me at womensleadershipintensive.ca. We're a Canadian company. And so there's a book page where people can find more information about the book there. And then there's also information about our women's leadership development program offerings on that site as well.
Perfect. What part of Canada are you in?
I am in, it's sort of, I wouldn't call it Northern Ontario because Northern in Canada is all relative.
Right.
But, I'm in Ontario, kind of 3 hours north of the Toronto area.
Okay. I've done quite a bit of extensive work in Canada. So I've been all over Canada, quite familiar with it. So this is great. This has been delightful. Thank you so much for being our guest today and for the work that you're doing because it's important.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
So to all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining us today. We know you have a choice of where to spend your time, and we're so grateful that you chose to spend it with us. Please follow or subscribe, rate the show. We certainly appreciate that with a review. And don't forget to grab your free gifts, and we will see you next time on Work From Your Happy Place.